Good morning, Laguna Woods. What a great day to think about a topic that's of great importance. I say great importance because we're going to talk about money and stewardship and what God has given us. And there are more verses in the Bible on how we handle our money and what we do with it than are on most every topic, I think.
That's right.
My expert today is Chris Goulard. And see, I gave you a title expert.
Expert. There you go.
but Chris has been in our financial ministry here at Saddleback for a lot of years.
Yeah, 17, 18 years now.
You've changed titles a number of times. I
Yep.
guess you have again recently. But if I can, well, why don't you generalize? What have you viewed as your ministry over the years?
Well, to me, I mean, you talk about the stewardship part of it anyway. That's always been
Yeah,
part of what I do and still is, and just in different ways. To me, helping our people just understand what it means to be a steward in God's kingdom. And that's really, I mean, sounds very simple, but that's a very complicated thing
it,
because that means anything from people who are struggling with credit card debt or just trying to, get control of their household finances, all the way up to people who, have a lot of wealth and are trying to figure out
yeah,
estate planning or, trying to think through their giving and generosity. So, I mean, really, we're all
yeah.
stewards, right? Regardless of how much God has given us, whether a 1 talent steward or a 5 talent steward, God's, you know,
And really, Chris, don't you think if we could just get across the fact that it's real easy for us to think this is mine.
yeah,
This is mine.
yep,
And but really we're just caretakers for what God cuz what's that phrase, we're not taking it with us.
that's right.
So
Yeah,
so we got to do good while we're here. Hey, we always start with a verse for the day.
okay,
And as I told you, this is a verse that's often misquoted. And I want to get it right today. And it's First Timothy 6:10. And it says this, "The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil." Now, I've heard it misquoted where they just say money is the root of
yeah.
all. It's not money.
No, it's not. Pink Floyd got that wrong back in the 70s, big time.
Was that where it started,
Yeah.
70s?
Well, I don't know if that started. That's just, you remember the song Money
Yeah.
by Pink Floyd? That was, for all you rock and roll
Okay.
fans, that maybe
Yeah.
that, you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, people misquote that all the time.
But it's the love of it. We have to have money.
Right.
I mean, that's how we trade and buy things and all that. So anyway, folks, it's just the love of money. That's what it is. And so we want to learn how to use it wisely. Have you got any? I wish we had discussed it a little bit more, but what are your tips for today?
So here's a
Where,
couple
where do you
things.
want to start?
I think that's a great place to start. If we, because a lot of these things tie together. I think if you look at it and go, okay, if we're stewards, in other words, the Bible's very clear. You can look at Matthew 25, the parable of the talents. There's a number of places you can, reference it. But the idea that everything belongs to God. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." So
That is
everything,
a great verse.
it's just so simple because God owns everything. And so we're in his kingdom. And in a sense, the culture around us all the time is telling us more is better. That
Yeah.
the more we have, the more we control, the better off we are. And the
It's
truth
like
is,
every
ownership is a curse because it comes with responsibility. It comes with, the more stuff you have, the more time it takes to take care of it, the more of a burden it becomes. In other words, is it easier to own an RV or is it easier to borrow your friend's RV? Right? It's easier to borrow your friend's RV
it is.
because he has to take care of it, right? It's kind of like if everything belongs to God, if we can recognize it's not ours, we're just going to manage it and take care of it. Now, with that comes responsibility. 1 Corinthians 4:2 says it's required of one who has been given a trust or one who's a
Mm.
steward that he be found faithful. So, if we're stewards, it's just like if you're going to lend your RV to somebody, you're going to assume that they're going to take care of it. They're going to be faithful in managing that, right? So God's the same way with us. He trusts us and he expects us to be faithful with what we have been given. So that's our job as stewards is to manage it.
One of my guidelines is if if I have to worry about the item, then I probably shouldn't buy it in the first place because if it gets
That's
lost or
good.
something, I don't want to be that upset about it. So I kind of watch my money that way. I
Yeah.
don't know. This is
Well,
my
in your verse
opinion.
in First Timothy, I mean, if we start instead of just caring for this stuff, if we start loving this stuff or caring for it so much that it becomes almost like an idol, then
Yeah.
we've crossed the line. I mean, it's a hard issue, right? It's not like there's a very clear delineation, but that's where the love of money creates all kinds of problems, right?
And I one of the things, and I'm going to ask you in just a second, what are, some of your guidelines or tips for how we should do that? But I do know that the Bible's pretty clear, at least for those of us who call ourselves Christians, that we're we start with that 10% of our money should,
Hmm.
or income at least, should go to the Lord.
Yep.
And so that's an easy one, and that's a math I actually can do.
Yeah.
It's a decimal point
People
thing.
always ask me, why did God choose 10%? And I have no idea. The Bible
No,
doesn't
I have no
say.
idea.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's easy math though. Like you just move the decimal one
Yeah.
place. I mean, it's real
So
easy, right?
so that's a starting point. But beyond that, what are your, I
Mm.
don't know, pet advice things?
Well, that's a fun one. I mean, to me, first of all, let me just say this: tithing actually really isn't giving; it's returning. The
Mm,
Bible usually uses the word "bring" or "return" when it's
yes,
talking about tithing, not giving, because
that's
if
good.
you know it says 10% of everything you earn is holy and belongs to me. So, and actually, that belongs to God. So all we're doing is returning it to Him. So
Yeah.
if I borrowed your RV, going back to my previous example, if I didn't return it to you, I'd be stealing it, right?
Yes.
So it's not giving; it's actually returning. So that's tithing. So we're all called to do that. Now, once we do that, then the question is, to me, as Christians, we're all. I mean, the Bible's very clear on this too, that we're supposed to be generous. Now that's a very
It's a big
fluid
term.
term. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a big term, and I think Pastor Rick, if we would say, "Gee, would you rather hang around generous people or stingy people?" We all know the answer to that, right? I mean,
Right.
so there's something winsome about generous people, but it's not about just the money. I mean, you can be generous with your time, you can be generous with your emotions, you can be generous with in your relationships. There's so many. Generosity is almost it's a mindset, it's an attitude, and we're supposed to be
Yeah.
generous. We really are. But when it comes to our money specifically, I think actually generosity really comes into play with the 90%, not the 10. So if we recognize we're stewards and we say, okay, Lord, this is no, there's 100% is yours. I'm returning the
Yes.
10 because you've asked me to do that. But what would you have me do with the 90%? Because it's not mine. See, because
I
I got
love
stuck in this
that.
for a long time. I started
Yes.
saying I want to be obedient with my 10%, right? Because that's being obedient and returning the 10%. But I had the mindset of like, but now the 90% is mine. So I was kind of taking on the mindset of an obedient owner. But see, I'm not an owner,
Yeah.
right? If I'm a steward, 100% belongs to God, right back to Psalm 24:1. So 100% belongs to Him. Now, okay, Lord, here's your 10, right? What would you're my boss.
Yeah.
What would you have me do with the 90%?
If we would only pray that
Mm-hmm.
and then think it through, but just start with prayer because that would build the attitude in. So, Lord, what do you want me to do with the rest?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, look,
Yeah.
you mentioned the Bible talks more about money and possessions than almost anything. One of the verses that a lot of people will know, but they don't often know the context, is this one. Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added as well.
Yes.
And people know that, and they think, okay, well, I'm going to seek God first. But the context of that verse is actually right before that is thinking about the birds in the air and the flowers of the field. Like,
Because
in other
God
words,
takes care of them.
God's going to take care of you.
Yeah.
And it's actually a money verse. What He's saying is, if we will just manage God's stuff well, if we will seek His wisdom, in other words, go to God and say, Lord, what would you have me do? He'll take care of the
Yeah.
details. We get so caught up in the details, we start worrying about everything, and then we get stuck in worry and stress. And
So, Chris, we could go on, but we can't
I
because
know.
our time's about up. I just want to tell all the people within our congregation, Chris has a seminar coming up for us, and I'm going to have it in our weekly email later on, all the details, and I hope you'll take advantage of that when it comes up. Thanks for coming, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
I hope we can do this again. And anyway, God bless.
Yeah, God
Thank you
bless.
for
Thanks,
coming.
Rick.
Okay. Bye, Lagoon Woods.